Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News Preview Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Samuel Rooke. The beast from the east might be slowing down football here, but it's still motoring on in France as the Coupe de France reached its latter stages. But who have made the semi-finals? All that and a look at the Ligue weekend ahead after the midweek headlines. Paris Saint-Germain won their second Ligue Classique in a week as an Angel Di Maria double helped them to another 3-0 win over their bitter rivals Marseille. However, Kylian Mbappe was brought off around half-time with an injury and could face a race to be fit for the Champions League clash with Real Madrid, with Neymar already ruled out of that fixture and possibly for the rest of the season with a broken metatarsal. Two national sides have made the Coupe de France semi-finals with them as Les Herbiers won 4-2 on penalties with Lens after a 0-0 draw in extra time, and Chambly won 1-0 over Ligue 1 side Strasbourg. Elation was soon met with sadness for Chambly, however, as co-founder Walter Luzi passed away minutes after the final whistle. In the other quarter-final, Caen have overseen Lyon this evening 1-0, thanks to Ismaël Diamonde. They will be facing Paris Saint-Germain, and we will have a third-tier side in the Coupe de France final, with both the smaller sides facing each other. What a great advert for a wonderful competition. And that's all for now. But for all your latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We'll start this week with those Coupe de France results, and in particular, Adam, that one, an extra Le Classique we were gifted this week. But much like the other fixture, it never really seemed out of Paris Saint-Germain's grip again. It was a game where, again, Marseille didn't really rise to an occasion, which they maybe could have caught them cold with that Neymar news still ringing in their ears.
Yeah, I was hoping for, in one of these two games, for Marseille to give PSG something to think about. And I think that sort of lasted for the first 10 minutes of the first game. When I felt like they looked like they had some sort of game plan, but they pressed up pretty high, but they left so much space in behind that it was exploited at the weekend. This is, and when the first goal went in, it was kind of never in doubt. And the same was the case yesterday. I think it was a really interesting PSG performance yesterday, because obviously knowing that they, before the game, the club announced that they were going to operate on Neymar, they're going to send him to Brazil to be operated on. And it really felt like that a number of the players were playing, obviously, for their place in the team, because I know that Di Maria is obviously first choice to replace him, but Julian Draxler played really well. And Marco Verratti had a much more influential game than he's had for a long time. When Pastore came on, he was brilliant in spells, some fantastic bits of skill that we haven't really seen from him either. And it really felt like there was a sense of kind of release in the team, and it was the best team performance, I think, perhaps all season. Like the way that they, against a quality opposition, the way that they played with the cohesion and the fluidity that they've looked for so much with Neymar and Mbappe, which are two amazing players, of course, but they do lend a sense of individualism to the side. And the third goal in particular really summed up that, that this team did beat Barcelona 4-0 at home last year in the first leg. Obviously, the second leg is a big caveat, and did play really well in spells last season. Obviously, they're ambushed by Monaco, and there are a lot of caveats to that too. But they can play really well as a team, and I was impressed with the display last night. And I don't think I've really been impressed with PSG's display as such for a very limited number of seasons. It's really interesting to see that kind of change in kind of attitude. There was so much more exuberance and so much more sort of there's a sense of release. I felt like that without Neymar, they could fill the space, very big space left by him. So that was really interesting. But as I'm sure we're going to talk, the injuries are still obviously very, very, very troublesome. But I think there's some hope for PSG, and it was a really good performance last night. So I enjoyed watching them play, which, obviously it's great to watch PSG play, but sometimes they can be a bit sort of frustrating with the sort of individual kind of rhetoric, perhaps, if you want to call it that they've had this season. But interesting, and be really interesting to see what happens next week.
Yeah, it's funny. It was more of a team performance, maybe not one we've seen since. It would have been sometime last year when Neymar was missing, and they played a little bit more cohesively. And that's the interesting one, really, Sam. Heading towards that Champions League game that's fast approaching now. It's just under a week away until they'll face Real Madrid at the Parc des Princes. Now, obviously, without Neymar, who is heading to Brazil for surgery, and the Brazil doctor is saying he could miss up to 3 months, which sounds like will shut him down for the World Cup more to me than anything else now for the national side. I think they're hoping that they can come to some sort of agreement with PSG that they don't rush him back unless obviously something happens in the Champions League as well. But with also Mbappe, he looks like he might be fit anyway. It might be sort of just a precaution, really, that he picked up a knock, but it's no guarantee. He might miss the game at the weekend, it looks like, as well. So they're starting to mount up. But do you think Paris Saint-Germain still have enough to deal with the Real Madrid side that this midweek obviously lost to Espanyol late? They're still not a perfect side, and they're still something to swing at.
Yeah, I mean, it would be somewhat ironic if PSG were to knock out Real Madrid without the two guys they spent all that money on in the summer. If the team essentially of last season was able to sort of pull together and knock out what is still a flawed Real Madrid side, particularly in the Champions League, we've not seen them anywhere near the sort of imperious, the two-time reigning European champions that they are. They haven't looked anything like that in the Champions League this season. Beaten by Tottenham, they beat Dortmund, but Dortmund had their own problems. Even in the first leg against PSG, not great, good enough to win 3-1, but that's kind of taking chances rather than really dominating the game. PSG easily could have won that game with a bit more luck. So certainly it's a team that's there to be beaten. Losing Neymar obviously is a big blow, but there's still a huge amount of depth for PSG to reach down to. Losing Mbappe would again be a big blow, but even so, I mean, the attacking riches that PSG have at their disposal, they can certainly still beat this Real Madrid team. Less talented sides than PSG have done that to Real Madrid this season, as we say. Obviously, you won't surprise Real Madrid in a Champions League away knockout second leg tie, but they're certainly beatable, and this PSG team are good enough to beat them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, Neymar was seen as that sort of X factor, wasn't he, when he was brought in? That there's someone that can maybe bring a little bit extra of that sort of special world-class dust that some of these players can produce on a nightly basis when they feel like it. And we've seen some performances from Neymar that have been absolutely terrific. But one man we haven't seen a load of, at least anyway, not as many as we've seen previously, is maybe someone like Mbappe in this kind of mold where he might. I think he'll probably make it back for the Real Madrid game, which is a big chance for him to take some of the limelight as well as Paris Saint-Germain. He's not really been talked about as much with Brazilian there, and he's not quite had that sort of glittering performance yet either. And this could be a real chance for him to take some of the limelight, especially with Neymar looking like he's going to miss the rest of the season as well. It's a real good chance for him. But let's very quickly, Adam, talk about the rest of the Coupe de France, which has gone a little bit mental, really. We obviously had Les Herbiers were playing Lens, so one lower league side was always going to make the semi-finals, but it happened to be the National side who take on another one with Chambly, who've been terrific in this tournament, and they eliminated a side we thought might even have a chance to get into the final in Strasbourg, and that's a great result for them and a great semi-final. And then even tonight as well, there's another one where Caen, who've had an up and down season, really, in a sense. They've not always been excellent, but they've had a couple of really good games, and they're a solid side, and they put a Lyon side that are completely out of funk at the moment, especially when playing in France, to the sword. So 3 interesting semi-finalists. Do any of them have any kind of chance of winning it?
And I don't think so, unfortunately. But I think it is a victory for the Coupe de France in general. I think PSG, Lyon, yes, they could beat PSG, and if they're drawn at home, that's a very difficult game for PSG. But I still think that obviously PSG are favourites. But overall, I think it still works out for the competition in general, given that you've got 2 third division sides, and it's not that well known that the third division is entirely, full time. There are some sort of it's effectively a semi-pro amateur division. So for those sides from the third division to make the semis is unbelievable on its own. But for them to play each other is brilliant, because it means, obviously, as you said at the beginning, one of them will get to the final. And that's the kind of thing that happens in this competition all the time. And if you look down the list of finals, even 2 years ago, Auxerre from the second division were in the final. In 2012, Quellevy from the third tier are now a Ligue 2 side, lost to Lyon narrowly 1-0. If you go even further back, Châteauroux, who were in Ligue 2 at the time in 2004, made the final. Calais made the final in 2000 and lost to Nantes 2-1. They're in the fourth division. So this kind of thing happens quite a lot. But I might have mentioned on the before, but my favourite example of this is is Excelsior from the Réunion Island, because obviously the Coupe de France includes all the French colonies and their teams in the earlier rounds, and they made it as far to when the Ligue 1 side came in, and they played Lille at Lille, which was brilliant. And that kind of thing kind of happens on a a yearly basis. There are 7,000 teams that enter, or even more than that, 7,000 or 8,000 teams that enter the tournament every year. And this just underlines, one, that it's what a great tournament is, and two, the strength and depth that France has in its lower divisions, even though perhaps some of them aren't fully professional. But unfortunately, I think PSG will comfortably beat Caen and quite comfortably win the final. But hopefully, there's that glimmer of hope, isn't there? Being a cup finisher, that they could slip up in the final. Or, we just hope they don't go and beat Les Herbiers or Chambly 8 or 9, which is possible. But there's still that glimmer of hope, isn't there? And that's what Cup in general is about. And the Coupe de France, for me, is possibly the best cup competition in the world. So it's great to see and a good advert for the tournament.
Yeah, but they're crossing their fingers for next midweek that they get past Real Madrid, stay in the Champions League, maybe make that a little bit of a distraction for them for ready for the final. Let's have them focus maybe a little bit too much on that, and maybe they could sneak one. That would be some great stuff to see. Really, it's great to see two national sides get there, and it's such a shame really for Chambly and their co-founder Walter Lutzi. Is obviously one of the biggest moments in their history, and it's very sad news to hear that he passed away just after the final whistle as well. Hopefully he's watching down on them and cheering them on to hopefully a Coupe de France final, which would be absolutely outstanding for them. Back on to Ligue 1 matters at least anyway, and the weekend ahead is another one that's full of intrigue with the messings at the bottom and the weird battle still going on different places in the league. And we'll start with Friday night's game between Monaco and Bordeaux, because Sam, on last weekend, Monaco have been in a great bit of form. They come up against a Toulouse side that have not been the greatest scorers really this season, but they somehow pulled out a 3-3 draw after being 3-1 down as well. And Monaco, again, it was a great opportunity for them as well, with Lyon facing Saint-Etienne and Marseille facing Paris Saint-Germain. And with hindsight, it was a great chance to pull away. But they will feel they'll need to get back on the horse with those facing more, let's say, easier opposition, or maybe at least less threatening opposition in terms of Saint-Etienne not necessarily being in the greatest of form. But it's an important week for Monaco to get back on the horse.
Yeah, I mean, I think they got lucky in that their rivals, as you mentioned, didn't take advantage of what has to be considered 2 points dropped. I mean, you leading a team that are struggling as badly as Toulouse are generally 3-1 with not a lot of time to go, and to have Yaya Sanogo of all people score the equaliser for Toulouse, that's not good. It's really not good for Monaco. And yes, they really do need to sort of get back on the horse, beat this Bordeaux side who, they're doing quite well. They're in good form. But Monaco, Toulouse side are in very good form themselves. So there should be no fear for them coming into this game, and the expectation has to be that they will get back to winning ways.
Yeah, and a bit of a funny one, really, that game, wasn't it? I still can't quite believe the Sanogo penalty that he won. It didn't really make much sense at the time. It still doesn't. And it's just, I think they will still look back at that thinking that in a Rome derby, it was always going to be feisty. There's a chance that Lyon would drop points. Marseille, obviously, facing Paris Saint-Germain, there was always a chance. And facing a Toulouse side that are still not quite really out of the mire yet, they're still well within that sort of dogfight at the bottom of the table. They maybe should have done a little bit better in that one. But they face a Bordeaux side that are in better form. They won 4 of the last 6, but the last 2 games have been that defeat to Marseille, 1-0. It wasn't the greatest of games for them, but then they've sort of followed that up with another sort of tepid kind of game against a Nice side where they were probably the better side, but they just couldn't really finish them off. It was sort of a tale of 2 clubs that have both sort of mediated this season, but at the same time, this is a difficult game for them, but a chance for them to try and put their own fight for Europa League place. Yeah,
absolutely. I think first of all, the game with Nice last weekend, I agree. They were the better side, and I think they hit the woodwork 4 times in that game, and were actually I thought played pretty well against the Nice side, who are obviously been a bit up and down of late after a sort of a revival before Christmas. But I think you can really see that Gaspoyet is having an effect. Whether that's going to last is obviously a very big question. But they are in good form, and this Europa League fight is a huge bonus given how their season went. We were scared they could get relegated at one point. And obviously this was their target at the start of the year, is to get back into Europe, even because they completely made a shambles of it, obviously losing to Videoton in the first round of the qualifiers for the Europa League this season. After all that hard work to get into Europa League to mess it up so extravagantly was a huge disappointment, and perhaps they didn't really recover from that. But to be 3 points off fifth, which is where they are now, obviously there's only 5 points between Saint-Etienne in 12th and Montpellier in fifth, so it's extremely close, and they're in 8th, Bordeaux on 36 points. But a win here would be a huge boost to their chances, and I think it's it's almost like it's sort of playing out for them. It's weird because Poyet's come in and he's added that extra sort of new manager bounce, and it's such a close fight, and that nobody in that group can really put some form together. And given that we expect PSG to win the Coupe de France, 6th will be a Europa League place 2, which means that Bordeaux have got an ample opportunity to make Europe again, which, if you said that before Christmas or when just before Gorfanet was sacked, you would have, it would have sounded ridiculous. So it's a season that they've managed to rescue, and anything here would be huge, because the teams around them probably aren't getting too many points from Monaco. So if they get something in this game, a huge bonus, and keeps them very much in that fight.
Yeah, and it's a strange thing to think that how they've risen up the table, but also now that 6th spot seems like it probably is more open than it was before this evening, at least. Anyway, that teams even down to Saint-Etienne, who are on 34 points, they're only 5 points off of 6th place at the moment. They might still be looking up as much as they might be just about forgetting about looking down, at least. Anyway, but an interesting game on Friday. Let's get some predictions. I'll start with you, Adam.
I'm going to say 2-1 Monaco.
Sam?
There's no Malcolm for Bordeaux, so I'm definitely going to say Monaco. I'll go 2-0.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Bordeaux have maybe in that run sort of bounced a little bit and then sort of shown their true colours in the last couple of weeks. I think this will be about a 3-0 win for Monaco. That result last week seems a little bit of an anomaly, and I don't think it ends up that way had they not given that very, very strange penalty decision. But on to an interesting game on Saturday, at least, and off the back of a really, really important win for Angers last weekend against Lille, where they were ahead. It looked like the points were going to be shared very late on with Nicolas Pepe return. Against these old side equalising, but Carl Toko Ekambi stealing that result really at the end. This is Adam. Does this feel like a game for them that against a Guingamp side that are sort of stuck in the middle of the table, they maybe still might chase that sort of 6th spot? They're not enormously far off but might not necessarily be concerned about that as much as some of the other big teams around there. Is this a chance for them to finally start trying to put a run together and start matching the quality that they do have when they play at their best?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I think this is the type of game that Angers would be targeting. A home game against Guingamp, who, with 11 games to go, are probably the most mid-table of all the sides. Obviously, it's very close across the table in various areas, but I'd say that although they're only 4 points off a Europa League place, their expectations aren't really to challenge for it, and they're definitely not going to get relegated. So this is the type of game where it's a little bit of a Breton derby. It'll be a good atmosphere at Angers with their new stand opening recently at the far end. So it's a huge opportunity for them to get a few points and extend the gap over Lille, who are only a point behind. It's very close at the bottom too. So I think they'll definitely be targeting this game. A couple of things that jump out to me about it is one, Roman Tamar has been left out in the last 2 games with Pavlovic starting ahead of him. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the rest of the season, because obviously he's one of the best on form anyway. He's up there in terms of best defenders in something like top 10, top 20 in the league. And it'd be interesting to see whether Moulin decides if he's just resting him. He's done that with Mangani at times and with Ismail Traore, just giving him a few games off because they've played so much football over the last few years, and especially this season too, that none of those players have really dropped. So it'd be interesting to see whether he's decided he's out of form or whether he's just giving him a few games off to let him recuperate a little bit. And also Carl Toko Ekambi, I think that although he's had a brilliant season and they've moved him up front mainly since Christmas, it's whether he can maintain the goal rate for the rest of the year that will help them sort of overcome that thing we talked about so often on the pod about that they play well but don't really get the results they deserve. And against Saint Etienne, he missed at least one, maybe two very, very clear-cut chances. And if he's not taking those chances, then they're going to struggle because he's the main source of goals. And with Baptiste Guillem being a huge disappointment, Cavelli leaving, he's not really a striker. I suppose he is a striker, but technically he's more of a winger. So there's a little bit of a hole there in the team if Toko Ekambi isn't being consistent. So a couple of issues for Moulin going to this game and for the rest of the last 10 or 11 games. But hopefully this will be an opportunity for them to take 3 points and go over that 30 mark, which is a milestone, the next milestone for them. So interesting one for them.
Yeah, and it was strange to think that Carl Toko Ekambi hadn't scored a goal from open play since early December before that brace against Lille, which was pretty crazy to think when he's on 13 goals for them, really. It seems very strange, at least, anyway. But they face a Guingamp side, Adam, that sort of maybe flirted with relegation in the first half of the season. They sort of dipped quite alarmingly just before the winter break and then suddenly rose again. They've gone on a strange run after that. There's 3 defeats, 3 consecutive draws now after a win against Rennes in the middle of that. As Adam said, they're sort of the perfect style of mid-table team, but at the same time, for Angers at least, probably the ideal opponent in this kind of game. But they can be really, really dangerous on their day. They've got excellent players in attacking areas. Are they going to really trouble on? Be something that's... It's a strange game, really. Is trying to think if Guingamp will really try and go for the jugular here, because a win on this one puts them into that race for the top 6 teams.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team, as you said, that is full of talent, and we for so long we sort of thought of Guingamp as sort of a little team, little stadium, not much expected of them. I think Adam said the same, that their expectations are probably not of being at the top end of the table, but looking at the teams around them, looking at the fact that no one outside of the top 4 has been able to put any kind of a real run together this season, there's a place there to push for. There are European places available for 2 of the chasing pack. There are, 6, 7 teams we've mentioned, all pushing for 2 European places. And there's no reason Guingamp can't be one of those. They've done better than most away from home. They're playing a team who are the second worst team at home in the league. This is a game very much that Guingamp can target to try and win, and they know that Angers are going to be trying to win it as well, which only opens the game up more, allows their sort of footballing players to play, which suits Guingamp. And absolutely, they should be targeting this game to win, and why not try and get into Europe?
Yeah, because especially when you look at their next sort of 5 games, really, they have they have 3 of the top 4 in the last 5 games, which is not ideal, really. But their next runs against Nice, Saint-Etienne, Bordeaux, Troyes, and Lille. So 2 sides near the bottom that they should be beating, as well as possibly Angers, and then 3 sides in and around those places. It's a great chance for them if they do go on get a bit of momentum and a bit of form, that they could quite feasibly be chasing at least that 6th spot that still seems pretty wide open, really. Let's get some predictions then. I'll start with you, Sam. What do you think in this one?
I'm going to back Guingamp to win this 1-0.
Adam?
I'm going to 1 each.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Adam. This feels like a 1-1 draw, which won't disappoint Angers too much. I don't think that'll help them. Every point really helps at the moment, although everyone keeps nicking little wins here and there, and it won't really trouble Guingamp if other results go their way. Possibly they might still be in the run, but they feel like that they're pretty comfortable at the moment. That run just before Christmas has really set them up nicely for the rest of the season. And then a clash right at the bottom of the table, really, between Metz and Toulouse. And Adam, we mentioned them briefly earlier in Toulouse, and they did excellently, really, to come back against Monaco in a way, although, like I say, possibly fortunately because of a bit of an assist from the referee, really. But they did admirably to stay in the game and work hard for the equaliser late on as well. An important point, they're sort of in that conjuncture of a few teams now that are on this. You could probably go all the way to, at least Amiens above them, a point above them. Lille are only a point behind them, who are 19th. So there's a lot of room, but a win here in an important game against the bottom side of the league, who still look like they're pretty much cut adrift. It'd be a massive win, wouldn't it? In the terms of they can maybe give themselves some breathing space and possibly even pull the likes of Strasbourg and Caen back into this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. A win here would be absolutely massive for Toulouse, given how close that bottom sort of third of the table is. It does feel like there's a little group developing of the bottom six of Metz, who still have an outside chance, given what Toulouse did under Depraz. They were 10 points adrift, 10 games to play, and stayed up. So there's not beyond the realms. Lille, Troyes, Toulouse, Angers, and Amiens. And you feel like the bottom three are going to come from those six. Obviously, only two get relegated. The third bottom side goes into a playoff. But yeah, those sides will definitely want to pull Strasbourg and Caen into the fight. But I have a feeling that both those two may, Strasbourg perhaps not, but Caen definitely will have too much to go down, or even be in the fight, really. So there's a hope that Strasbourg could, for those sides below it, that Strasbourg could get pulled in. But any win for any of these teams is absolutely massive. And I think it's this getting to the stage of the season where they should, some of those teams, like Angers, Amiens, Toulouse, those ones are sort of, who've perhaps got the potential to win a few more games. You know, we talked about Angers not getting the results they necessarily deserve. Amiens had some fantastic form early in the season. They've got some good attacking players. You know, good Couters, obviously a very important player for them, and get him on form like he was at Nantes last week. Fantastic goal to win the game 1-0. You know, they can pick up points, and it comes back to like a very simple part of football, that 3 points a win and 1 point for a draw. There's no point being conservative at this stage, given how valuable wins are. If you go for wins, you know, you go win once and lose twice, then you've got 3 points. Whereas drawing every game 0-0, you've only got 3. So against sides like this Angers game and this game for Metz, especially in Toulouse, then go for the win, because a win would be so important. Obviously, it's a little bit of a risk, but given simple maths makes you think that there should be a little bit more gumption for these teams to go for the victory. In terms of Toulouse, as a team, they'll have Max Gradel back. I really think he's carried the side this season. He's been, although like perhaps not necessarily in terms of statistics and goals and assists, but I think he's been their stand-up player. And if they can keep him playing at the level that he has been over the last couple of weeks, especially the last 3 games, I think he's been really good. Then they'll have a little bit too much for sides like Metz, obviously, Toulouse, maybe even Lille. So big return for them, and I hope that they buck the trend and try and take those 3 points, because they could be massive given how tight it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more, really. And it's positive for them that maybe some people are starting to get a little bit more confidence as well. You think Yaya Sanogo as well, who was important in that game at the weekend as well, and Andy Delors scored that penalty as well, although I don't really agree to his sort of a swagger Conor McGregor-esque celebration when you've just scored a penalty to make it 3-2 really against Monaco. I don't really think it was time for that or anything like that. But they come against a side, Sam, that are on the floor or on their knees, have had bullet holes through them all season, but there's still maybe one more bullet left in the chamber, really. They're not quite dead yet. I mean, Nolan Roux's on double figures now as well, which is fantastic news for him and the club, that they've at least got someone scoring. But a loss here, and if other results start going their way, then it's from a mountain is becoming impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've written Metz's death warrant more than once this season. I think even before the end of last year, we'd pretty much written them off, and then they staged that little comeback, and it's really brought them within range, but they're still such a long way. I mean, 9 points from the relegation playoff place, that's a lot when you're talking about a team that's just not going to win too many more games. I mean, yeah, it's 3 games out of 11 that are left. From that perspective, you think, well, very much doable, but Metz are probably not going to win that many games. It's very, very difficult for them. If they have any hope whatsoever, they really need to beat Toulouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And you start looking at their games coming as well. And they've got Paris Saint-Germain after this one, which is maybe they can hope there's some hangover from that midweek game against Real Madrid and just go for it, really. They did well at home, at least, against them for a long period until Benoit Coteau was sent off. And they do have a lot of games left against sides just above them. Strasbourg, they've still got Caen, they've still got Lille, they've still got Angers, Amiens. So there's still a little bit of hope. And especially if they get a result here, it just feels like a shame that they couldn't hold on against Guingamp. If they could have maybe nicked that one, then you've got a little bit more optimism with those games still to come. I mean, the Troyes defeat was heartbreaking, really, but that kind of unexpected victory with those games still left to go, you would have felt that they might just have been able to upset the apple cart a little bit. But let's get some predictions now, and I'll start with you, Sam. What do you think in this one?
Geez, I really don't know what to think about this game. I have to feel like it's going to be open because both sides know they need to win. So with that in mind, I'm going to say 2-1 Toulouse.
Adam?
I think Metz might win this. I'm 1-0 Metz. Toulouse are terrible away from home, so 1-0 Metz.
I'm going for 2-1 Metz as well. I just fancy them to nick this one. And if they start maybe believing again and they keep that momentum, they're not going to get it against Paris Saint-Germain, but not. We'll come on to them later, a team to be shot at the moment. Strasbourg aren't in the greatest of form. They've got Lyon after that, who hopefully for them at least might still be in a bit of a mire come April, or at least be sorrowful about it. And then you start thinking that the rest of their games are all games that they have a shot in, and that's exactly the kind of thing we want to hear when there's possibilities of a great escape, which I know we all love a little bit of. And coming on to Lyon, really, and they face Montpellier away, which is not the kind of game really you want to be going when you're in a terrible run of form, really, Adam. Lyon, in the last sort of 6 games, they haven't won in Ligue and at least Coupe de France. I know Europa League is a little bit of difference, but they haven't won any of them. They've allowed teams to come from behind regularly. That's happened 3 times in this run, against Saint-Etienne last week, against Lille the weekend before, against Monaco as well. They lost to Rennes, they've lost to Bordeaux, who were both in sort of differing forms, and then lost this evening as well against Caen as well in the Cup, which was a chance for them maybe to get something out of this season. That's after that PSG game where we all praised them and thought that they showed exactly what they kind of be. They've absolutely fallen off a cliff. It was almost like that win sapped all their energy and all their belief from them. Yeah,
it's bizarre, isn't it? What has happened to them? It's amazing that defeat, that sort of defeat of PSG. You're absolutely right. We talked about on the pod, they were 8 points behind. There was a very, very slim chance of them perhaps challenging for the title. Obviously, that was us sort of hoping more than anything else, but it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility. And since they've just completely capitulated, it's bizarre. It's really difficult to know where to lay the blame. I think perhaps they've run into a few sides who perhaps have their number. Perhaps the form that players like Nabil Fekir, Hossam Aouar, who's only started 2 of the last 6 games, 2 last 7, sorry. Even Depay had a few sort of spells this season. They've kind of dropped off and they haven't really been performing as well. Maybe the Europa League is starting to catch up with them because they're taking that competition, they're taking that seriously, and they've played pretty well in that competition so far this year. Being Villarreal was a huge result. So maybe that's sort of because that is a very, very difficult thing for young Ligue sides to handle. Bordeaux and Saint-Etienne will testify to that over recent years. But maybe Genesio's kind of run out of ideas a little bit as well. And I feel like that before they were this kind of youthful, exuberant, fluid team that could unlock teams, not at will, but they definitely could, outplay sides, most of the sides in the league. But recently they kind of felt a little bit sort of lackluster and a bit sort of drudging, and they haven't had the spark that they had earlier in the year. And those creative players that I mentioned perhaps have found themselves a little bit off form, a little bit isolated, and haven't been able to pick the lock to teams that possibly have figured out how to play against Lyon because they need the space. They've got loads of quick attacking flair players as well as those creative players. You look at Traoré and Mariano Diaz and Cornet, players like that. They need the space to run into it. If you sit off against them, which obviously Montpellier will probably do, even though they're at home, who are obviously very good against the top 4 sides this year, then they find it very difficult in that sort of suffocating atmosphere and that suffocating kind of style of opponent. So I think they need to sort of refresh themselves a little bit in terms of their style and the way they go about winning games. But they're kind of like, we've talked about it before, but they're kind of a little bit cut adrift, and the Champions League is going to be very difficult for them now. They're 7 points off Monaco, 5 off Marseille. It's turning into a pretty poor year for them given how it started. So I think Genesio needs to find a solution because his tenure of the club's been up and down as it is, and he's under more questions now. So if they keep going like this, I'm not sure he'll survive till next season. It'd be interesting to see how the club sort of plays out over the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, you think that their sort of focus is probably going to shift to that Europa League campaign now, really. And you also look at the side still in that competition, though. They've got CSKA Moscow next, who aren't always the easiest side, especially when you face them in Russia as well. They are a decent team on their day. And then you think also that the teams left in there, Dortmund, especially Atletico Madrid, should, unless they obviously win at the weekend, and then all of a sudden the La Liga races back on maybe, but they're a kind of team that are going to take no prisoners as well. RB Leipzig, AC Milan are in terrific form. They've not lost in 13 games. They're a tough side at the moment. There's a lot of trepidation they would have to go through to try and win that competition now, and they might have some trepidation really, Sam, on the weekend, because Montpellier, while it's been a little bit more lackluster recently, they had the loss to Paris Saint-Germain a few weeks ago. They faced Angers and Metz in equal weeks and nicked wins there, but had to come from behind against Guingamp. It was really, really bad game on Friday. I do apologise to anyone who watched that on Friday, because it was absolutely awful, really. But that managed to lift them to fifth. But they are a stingy side that are going to suffocate a Lyon team that are, frankly, a little bit cumbersome up front at the moment.
I mean, this is not the game that Lyon need to get out of this run of form. I mean, the game tonight against Caen, again, they've dominated all the ball, they've had all the chances, but they've been undone by a set piece. It's just the same story over and over again. The changes that Genesio makes are so confusing every time. He just makes baffling substitutions. It's as if he's trying to affect the results that he does get, as if he doesn't want to win these games. The changes are baffling. And it's again and again and again. And Montpellier are just the perfect side to carry on Lyon's form. Lyon will have plenty of the ball. They'll have plenty of room to pass it around in front, but they'll have a great deal of trouble breaking them down, and it's just going to be more of the same. Montpellier, sure, they're not in great form, 6th in the form table. Lyon are 18th in the form table in Ligue 1, which is just ridiculous. And we've talked about the fact they've just fallen off a cliff, but it's just baffling. But it's the same problems over and over again. And they beat Villarreal because, not entirely, but at least in part because Villarreal were willing to play. And then it became a test of who had the most talent, who had the most ability to actually play football. And Lyon are a team full of talent, but they're a team that's badly put together and very badly organised. And when they come up against teams like Montpellier, who are better organised, they just sort of seem to smash against the rocks. And I'm sure that's what we'll see again.
And then you start to worry about other things as well. I mean, I think that their recent sort of poor form is symptomatic of the attacking players, a lot of them at least anyway. The defence has had troubles, really. They maybe got a little bit lucky in a sort of run where they solidified a bit. A lot of the pressure was taken off of them, and they've sort of returned again as the attacking players sort of diminished. But too many of them are sort of sinking into their crutches. The reason why some of them aren't in the bigger teams. I mean, Fekir can be forgiven for having a sort of off sort of couple of weeks. It's can't be expected to keep the level that he had earlier this season throughout the entire campaign, really. But Mariano Diaz is consistently one of the most greedy forwards I've ever seen. I think he constantly wants the ball and won't give it anyone else sometimes. Memphis Depay is pretty similar as well. He tries way too many ridiculous shots from outside the area. Whenever he's got a little bit of space, he's trying to shoot and it just wastes the ball. I think the only one... and when Cornet comes on, he just doesn't really add anything. He doesn't have a real spark. He sometimes looks to get in behind, but he doesn't time his runs always the greatest. And then Aouar isn't maybe having that little dip as young players do, but I think he's still better in the central area. But Genesio does tend to seem to still start him in wide areas fairly often. And then the only one really that comes out okay is Bertrand Traoré, who has scored a fair few goals recently, at least anyway. But at the same time, you start to worry about Genesio because we've mentioned before he's never really looked like the man to lead them forward. And then you start worrying about some of the news that's come out of the club through different media outlets that the young player Goebbels is one of their more interesting prospects. Again, he's not looking to sign a new contract and looking to leave in the summer as well. That's a terrible blow for him with what is many are saying is another very, very exciting talent from their academy. And they're coming up against what is really the boa constrictor of Ligue 1, isn't it? Montpellier are a horrible constricting side that are just going to squeeze the life out of them, really. And then hopefully, if they can try, give Giovanni Sio that one chance and maybe he sticks it away and takes a 1-0 win, which really helps strengthen their position for 5th. But let's get some predictions on this one. And I know it's probably going to be a tough one, really, but I'll start with you, Adam. What do you think the result will be?
I'm going to go 0-0. I don't know if Montpellier will quite win, but I think they'll stop Lyon scoring.
Adam? Yeah, Sam, sorry?
I'm sure. I said it earlier. I'm sure this will be a Montpellier 1-0.
I'm agreeing with you, Sam. This feels, doesn't it, just like a Montpellier 1-0. It feels like Lyon will try a little bit of everything. After 20 minutes, they'll lose some of their impetus and it will just slowly fade into sort of the second half where they'll nick one goal through a little bit of either dim-wittedness at the back or a bit of a loss of possession in sort of transition and Montpellier sees on it and then the game will sort of be over from there. But on to Sunday night's game and an interesting one for two sides really that have had pretty bad weeks, really, to put it lightly, really. And Marseille and Nantes, starting with the home side, Sam, Marseille, it's not been the greatest of weeks. I mean, not many people want to face PSG twice in a week, but 6-0 on aggregate, two relatively middling performances as well when you thought that maybe this was a chance for Marseille to, especially in the bigger games this season, they have looked better in recent weeks as well, and they were on a terrific run of form before then, but they've hit a brick wall, haven't they? It's just seemingly like their momentum has stopped. They obviously had that they qualified in the Europa League, but at the same time, this hopefully for them is a chance to get back on the horse.
Yeah, I mean these two games against PSG, I think we hoped probably for a little more from them. It was a little bit of flattering to deceive, perhaps. The game at the Velodrome earlier in the season when they were so good and really surprised PSG and should have won probably to equal Cavani equalising so very late, make it 2-2. That was a game they should have won. It was arguably a moral victory, but there was nothing like a moral victory out of either of the games this week. PSG comfortably so much better, and Marseille not just bad but lacking the intensity, lacking the sort of the cohesion that we've seen from them in these big games. We've seen them pull together as a unit and really look good in the big games, as you mentioned. There's some very dumb mistakes we saw from them in these two games. Really uncharacteristic of a team that I think I've grown to admire this season. This group have played above themselves more often than not, and that wasn't the case against PSG. I mean, sure, you probably don't expect them to beat PSG, but they must have been optimistic to at least get something out of this week. We've got nothing to pretty meekly lose both games. That's going to be disappointing. But now not give them an opportunity to get runs back on the board, not to really drifting. They're not really playing towards anything at this point. They're very 15th in the form table. They're not a team that are really sort of going places. Marseille are still chasing second and certainly looking to at least consolidate that top three, consolidate Champions League football for next season, which is huge for the club, for the sporting project, all of that. There's every reason for them to be really, really up for this game. It's a game they need to win, and it's a game they should be able to win.
Yeah, it's maybe gone a little bit under the radar, really, Adam, that since the turn of the year, since they come back from the winter break, in 10 games in all competitions, they've only won 2, and that was one against Municipale Senlis, who's an amateur side, and a 3-0 win, quite surprisingly, really, against Guingamp. But they lost to Auxerre in that run. They lost to Amiens last week as well, at home as well, of all things. But they're still in 6th, really, which is maybe an indictment of the rest of Liga. It's mid-table at the moment, really. But they're on a real slide that is why a lot of people are having some encouragement for the Europa League places. Is this really... This is a tough game for them to try and get back into the form that in the first half of the season got them a lot of praise.
It is, and it is alarming the their slide it's surprising. Like you said, they've only won 2 games this calendar year, and they weren't particularly. The cup game wasn't. It was a game they expected to win quite comfortably, and they're kind of living off that success very early in the season. After losing their first 2 games, they then won 7 of the next 9. Or was it 8? Sorry, 6 of the next 8 possibly. And since then, if you look at their form overall, they've only won 5 games since the 21st of October. So I feel like the slide and kind of masked by the fact that other teams would be able to capitalise. And until last week, they were still 5th, despite that record of only winning 1 league game this year. It's really difficult to pinpoint because I don't think Ranieri deserves too much criticism, because if you look at their squad, he's done a really good job. And they, I know he brought in a lot of players in the summer, and they missed out on a lot of targets. 2 of players that he wanted, and ended up signing like Khalifa Koulibaly, perhaps who wasn't necessarily first choice as a striker, and he's been injured for most of the time. A few players like that. Rene Krin as well was perhaps not first choice in that defensive midfield position, brought him, and he's done a decent job at times, same as Andre Girotto. He got the best out of this team. And if you look at the league in general, at the start of the season, weren't expected to challenge Europa League places, and definitely weren't expected to maintain this sort of form or this sort of position in the table for such a long time. And Ranieri's done a great job. So I don't know necessarily that he's the issue. In fact, I think he's a very good manager, and perhaps as L'Equipe reported on their now yearly sort of team budgets and player salaries piece, that Ranieri is the 3rd highest paid manager in the league, and I think that's deserved. I think he's done a great job. It's just perhaps that the limitations of the squad are finally catching up with him. And Emiliano's salary is pretty much their only source of goals. The Valentin Ronger's not been in the best form. Trent Thompson's played a bit better recently, but they've got a bit of a lack of creativity in that field. It's a bit workmanlike. And if Diego Carlos and Nicola Pau has been okay recently, if those 2 defenders aren't really on their game, then they can end up being a little bit porous too. You look at Leo Dubois as a very good attacking fullback, perhaps still not the best positionally. Lucas Lima is very much in that mould, to the point where he dropped out of the side, despite the fact that he's very effective going forward, because he was, he's been played in midfield quite a lot this season, because Ranieri said he's not that great a defender. He has played at left back a lot recently. So there's a lot of holes in this team when you look at it sort of on paper, and it's Ranieri's, streetwise sort of knowledge and his experience that's got them over the line. And I think it's just the fact that lack of quality and lack of sort of, it's going to be difficult to see how they're going to arrest this slide. Maybe the other Ranieri kind of magic's wearing off a little bit.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, I never think you can really rely exclusively on Emiliano Sala for goals, for one thing. It's not the most reliable thing really to do, although he does have his own charm about him in a Bambi-like fashion, you might say, really, to be fair, more than anything. But yeah, they've been really poor recently. They lack creativity. They just don't seem to have that sort of, they seem to grind out a lot of results, and you look at the games against Lille and against Caen as well, they were ahead at times of those games. The games they probably feel they should be winning in the position they're in, and they just didn't really quite get over the line. And like you mentioned, maybe this is, well, it's a little bit of a shame, but at the same time, we all probably thought Nantes will be nowhere near where they are at the start of the season, given how superbly Conceição did with this squad. We didn't think Ranieri would be able to necessarily extract the same attacking intent that they showed at times at the end of last season, but they've done reasonably well. They do probably need investment in the summer to become a more consistent team, and hopefully that will come for them. But a big game for them on Sunday evening, a big game for Marseille. Let's get some predictions to finish this off then. Go ahead, Adam. I'll start with you.
Marseille 3-0, I think.
Sam?
I think Nantes are just cruising to the end of the season, and Marseille really has something to play for. I think they're going to come out and maybe make a little statement. I'd have said 3-0, but Adam's already said that, so I'll say 4-0 Marseille. Yeah,
it does feel like one of those games where Marseille might just cruise to win. I'm actually going to go for 1-0. This feels a little bit more like that Bordeaux game where maybe they, at the moment, Marseille especially, sometimes they seem to get ahead and then take their foot off the gas, and that feels like that. But the difference in this to other games, at least where they like drew against Saint-Etienne, aren't going to be the team that's going to punish that kind of thing at the moment, really. I think Marseille will walk out a relatively comfortable 1-0 win. That's all for this week. My thanks to Adam, Sam, and all of you listening at home. Join us for the main show on Monday. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.